Welcome to Dark Horizon Creations. I'm Mike, and today we continue our series Let's Paint a Warthog with part 3, and this is the weathering tutorial where I'm going to show you guys how to actually paint on the effects of splashed mud and things like that. Now our chassis has had time to dry all the metallic colors and things like that. You'll see some areas where I just used a Elmer's paint pen to kind of give it a rough effect around the rotors and disc and things like that. Nevertheless, Meritor is still in business 500 years in the future, and this is weathering that was on the toy when I purchased it on the side of the body. So I'm going to show you guys how to weather it today, and what we're going to be using is this brown oxide. Really cool paint by Apple Barrel. And we're just going to put a glob of it in the lid here. I know some of you are asking why I don't use a paint palette. I have one in my drawer. This is just more convenient for me at times. We've got a couple of different flathead brushes by Royal Art Brush that we've previously used and we're going to continue to use today. And I'm going to show you guys how to do this. And again, you know, I dry brush, I put paint on the brush, and then I wipe most of it off. So to begin, we're going to look at the chassis under here, and we're just going to dry brush some of this on. And again, this is personal preference. However much of this you want to put on here, you know, it's your vehicle. If you want it to look factory fresh, that's your choice. If you want it to look really muddy, again, that's up to you. It's all on how you want your truck to look. The thing I will tell you is you have to visualize what these vehicles look like. One way I do that sometimes, you know, if I'm not sure about something, is I will go and look at reference photos of actual military vehicles deployed and see what they look like. You know, this has been through sand and mud and dirt and things like that to kind of get a feel for how my vehicle should look. And I'll sometimes use that, but more often than not, you know, just because of a little bit of experience that I've got, you know, I know what I'm looking for, and I just kind of visualize things in my head, and I go from there. And you can, you guys can see that, you can use a wash if you want to do that. I just choose to dry brush it on because it makes it look more realistic. And when I come back like this with a Q-tip and wipe it off, it looks dried on there, and it will dry that way. And you know, that looks really realistic. You know, that's how some of these trucks look after they've been in the field for a while, you know, and they haven't been washed. And you know, part of the duties of the people assigned to the vehicles to keep them clean. You know, but what we're going for is a toy that we can use for dioramas and toy photography and things like that. You know, you just have to remember that when you're doing this, the paint has to be even. You know, even though I'm dry brushing this on here, and when I say even, I don't mean like every little detail has to be perfect. What I mean is, if you're going to splash mud all over the vehicle, you have to put it where the mud's going to go. And I'm going heavy here because I'm going to come back and wipe that down. But you can imagine the wheel well absorbs a lot of the mud. And I'm not going to leave that like that. You're like, oh my God, he's putting so much paint on there. There's a reason for that. And you'll see that in just a minute. You know, and there's no set right or wrong way to do this. As I said before, it's all trial and error. You know, and you learn from your mistakes. And you know, more often than not, you just, you know, kind of feel your way through this, like how it should be done. And you know, you can use techniques and things that other people post. You can always get good ideas from experienced customizers and things, but you know, I like to try new things, but more often than not, I find that you know, if I just play around with it and try it on my own, it comes out like this. You know, and that's all that I did. You know, when I started doing this, I was just trying to see if I could do it. And I made a lot of mistakes. There were times where I used too much paint, or I used the wrong kind of paint on one or two of the toys I tried, or you know, I didn't give the paint time to dry, things like that. But you learn as you go along. You know, and that's part of the fun in it. You know, you get to learn new things, and sometimes you surprise yourself and you're like, man, I didn't know that was going to be like that, or that was going to work, and it comes out better than what you thought. And now, I'm going to put a lot of paint on the brush for a minute so I can show you guys something. When you're painting the body and weathering it, you want to go straight back. Because think about it, if the truck's driving through a mud hole, this is where the mud's going to go. And I try not to get any on the windshield, just because it's that acrylic plastic, and I don't really want to mess that up. You guys can see what I'm doing here. And again, I'm going to wipe all this down. I'm not leaving this like that. This is only one part of what we're going to do to this truck. And I also try to be careful, you know, if I have to touch something that's wet, I try to be careful what I touch. And I know there are guys that'll say, well, man, you should have let this dry before you done that, or what. Well, maybe you do it that way, I don't. You know, that's the whole point in doing this, is to show you guys how I do it. But again, that's just the way I do things, not the way you have to do them. So now we're going to come back, and this is nice and wet. I'm going to take this Q-tip. I'm going to start scraping paint off. Just like this. And if you prefer, you can take a dry paper towel, come back and wipe it, and get most of it off. But what you're going to wind up doing is having to wet it, because if you don't, the paint's going to become too gunky where you can't do anything. And again, we want it to look weathered. All the way around. And I've probably done 5 or 6 of these trucks. I've got them, I'm taking commissions on them for $80 a piece. That includes the cost of buying the actual toy, as well as my fees for customizing it however the client would like to have it. So now we're going to come under here. We're going to wipe this down. I told you guys I wasn't going to leave it like that. See that? How nasty that looks? That's how they look when they've been through the mud. And you don't want to wipe it all off. Mud, again, remember, is dirt and water mostly. So it's going to be wet, and because of the water, that makes the liquefied dirt heavy and causes it to drip off. But what's going to happen is it's going to cake on to certain areas, and it's just going to stay there. It's not going to come off until it's washed off. And that's how what I'm going for here. Excuse me, what I'm going for here. I want it to look that way. Now I will tell you, if you've got paint on your hands like I do, and again, that's why I wear gloves, but unfortunately, people are going into the automotive and hardware section of Walmart and buying all of the nitrile gloves for use at home or wherever that they're wearing gloves at, and it makes it impossible to get any. So check that out. That's how it looks. I might clean this front end up a little bit. See how that's beginning to look? And we will take our brush and dry brush some more on the other side here. That looks too clean, particularly in light of how dirty we just got this thing. All that under there should have dried mud. And you may run into a few spots that are difficult to reach, but there's a fuel tank. We definitely want it to have mud on it because where it's positioned up here in the frame. How about that? That's beginning to look like a real Warthog, right? Well, let's take a look at our tires. We've repainted them. Outside wall, inside wall, treads. They've got dried mud all over them. I want to say there was one. Let's see. Could use some more. Use some more mud on it. Now we're going to go ahead and snap those on. Now it's beginning to look like a Warthog, right? We're not through. Once more, and go over this. before we apply our wash. So what we're going to do now is let that dry for a few minutes. We're going to come back and I'm going to put a black wash on it. Stay tuned. Alright guys, we're back and our Warthog has had time to dry. So what we're going to do now is address any issues that need to be cleared up before we move forward. And I see one spot. That was damp. That was just water. Okay. Now what we're going to do is apply our black wash. And what I'm using is this Apple Barrel Gloss Black. Mixed it with water. And we're going to take this and begin doing this number with it. And again, it's your personal preference how you do this. I know some people like to put the wash on first before they do any weathering. Also, there are people that will only do sections of the vehicle at a time. And then there are folks who will do what I'm doing and cover one whole section at a time or the whole vehicle at once. It's entirely up to you. It's, you know, your toy. You do it the way you want to do it. I will tell you to kind of be careful, you know, about doing the roll bars. Because it will drip down into the cab of the truck there. And this, you don't really have to be concerned with the direction that you put it on, as long as it's dripping down. And I'm going to put some on the winch here because I want it to look weathered, but I also want to make it look more realistic where you can see the lines in between the winch. And you can, if you like, use a wash on the suspension like on the springs or whatever. If you want to try to bring out more detail. It's kind of difficult because of where they're positioned. So what I try to use are these Elmer's painters. They're acrylic paint pens. The issue with using these is once they dry, they're dry. They're not coming off. I have yet to find a way to get that to come off. But again, it is acrylic, so you can use it on most plastics. And you're probably asking why I haven't put the wash on the wheels and the tires. That's because I've already done those. If you haven't seen the previous video, you need to go back and watch it. That was one of the first things that I did. And of course, it's not going to be able to run inside the bed of the truck. I don't really want it to. I want it to sit there and just kind of accumulate and almost dry, so that I can come back and just wipe it down. Because again, you have to remember, vehicles like this get really, really dirty really fast. And, you know, when you're in a theater of war, you know, of course, you know, when you're deploying where you're going, what part of the world and things like that, and you're trained to operate in all kinds of environments and stuff. But you really have to understand that there are things that aren't always taken into accountability. And when you're in a combat situation, you're not concerned if the truck's clean or not necessarily. That's part of maintenance on the vehicle because, you know, dirt and mud, things like that have an effect on parts. And they have a tendency to break down very quickly. You know, so they kind of have to be babied to an extent. If you take care of the vehicle, it's going to keep running. If you don't, it's not. I'm going to let that sit there for just a few minutes. And one of the things I want to point out, and I think I showed this in the initial video, the M41 lag that came with this truck, the end of the barrel is warped because it's that soft plastic. So in our next video, when we repaint this, as well as the fuel cans and things like that, I'm going to address this and how to fix this in case you run into that, because this is an unfortunate thing, and really they should have made this out of a rigid plastic. It shouldn't have been made out of this. That is the only complaint that I have about these vehicles by Wicked Cool Toys. And again, you know, when you're applying a wash, there's a couple different ways to get up the excess. One way is to use a Q-tip, because it will almost draw up the moisture into it. And if you look, you see spots like that. That you don't want to leave. You do want it to look streaked up and dirty, but you don't want to let spots like that accumulate, because if it dries that way, you will have to go back and clean it and start over. So you don't want any dark spots. The goal of doing this is to get into places that are, you know, the panel lines and things like that. All the little nooks and crannies on the vehicle to make it look weathered. And this particular place here and right here, those are two places where you do want the wash to go and to settle. And what's going to happen is you're going to end up with some of the brown mixing in with the black. And you can take your Q-tip and do what I'm doing right now and just kind of scrape it back and forth. And you want to get the excess off. You don't want to leave any excess on there, because that's just one coating. You're going to come back and put another coating of wash. That I want to leave across the UNSC emblem because that looks realistic. And you can, you know, use a paper towel and doing this will give it that streaking effect where it looks really dirty. But if you have areas, and you will, that you want to clean off, then my suggestion is take a Q-tip, rub it down. I'm going to leave this because I'm going to show you how to deal with that in a moment. When you're deployed, particularly when you're in countries like Iraq, there was a lot of mud and things over there. When it would rain, you know, that the sand would create quicksand in some places, really. That type of effect. And it would just be ridiculous to try to get trucks out of that. And you'd have vehicles, I mean, that were just caked in mud. you know, tanks and everything else. And sometimes they got stuck. I mean, have to call somebody to come pull them out. So I want to show you guys real quick, like this spot right here. Just put a little bit of 70% isopropyl alcohol. This is what I use to clean up with. I don't use water, even though you can use, you know, water to clean this up, particularly warm water. I prefer the alcohol because it's a lot quicker. You get a stubborn spot like this, you just wipe that with your Q-tip, come back with a paper towel and just wipe it. And this will be a place that, you know, you have to come back and weather again. And you can also do that, you know, you can take it. If you don't like the way that the effect is looking, you know, it just looks messed up to you and doesn't look right and you want to redo it, you can take the Q-tip and go across and redo those spots. Nothing wrong with that. I personally like the way it's starting to look because it looks like vehicles that I've seen. And with the wash, you can make it as diluted as you would like, or you can make it thicker. It depends on how much paint you put in the container and how much water you put in with it. Generally speaking, you put half and half. Half paint and half water. Depending on what kind of look you're going for. Now, let's say that you want the bed of the truck to look muddy. You used a wash, didn't quite turn out the way you wanted it. Come back, get your brush, and dry brush it. You know, got a bunch of guys back here. You know, it's been in the bed of the truck. You can just kind of spread it around like that. Maybe they hit a huge mud hole and threw a lot of mud in the back of the truck, and now it's dry. And I'm going to leave that just like it is. And that's all there is to it. That's how you weather the Warthog. And you know, it's come out really, really nice. I like the way that this one looks. I've done a couple like this with varying degrees of dirtiness and mud and things like that. And again, you know, you can go back and apply another wash to it, or you can leave it alone, or, you know, you can paint battle damage on it. I mean, there's all kind of things that you can do to these toys to make them look realistic. Again, it's all up to you. So, in part 4, we're going to take a look at the M41 lag. And I'm going to show you guys how to fix this, the warp barrel, as well as how to weather this. And we're also going to weather the fuel cans. We're going to attach those and prepare for our final video in part 5 on repainting the Master Chief. Thank you guys for watching the video. If you haven't, please like, follow, and subscribe to my social media pages, Facebook, Instagram, as well as my YouTube channel. Hit that bell icon so you get a notification when the next video is posted. You can also check out my blog as I start it back up, www.darkhorizoncreations.home.blog. I have also begun a Patreon. And on the Patreon, what we are going to be doing is a series of exclusive videos of repainting the Leonard Toys Predator action figures. And that is exclusive to Patreon. We're going to review those on our on our YouTube channel here, but the tutorials on how to repaint the Predator figures, that's going to be exclusive to Patreon. It will require a subscription. There are 2 different levels of support on my Patreon page. I just set it up, so there's no content on there as of yet. There will be Monday, March the 15th. That will be the first video that will be posted, beginning with the City Hunter Predator from the Lennar Toys Predator line of action figures. If you guys haven't checked that line out, check it out. There's a 7-inch line and a 12-inch line. I'm going to be reviewing all of those this coming week, the week of March the 15th. So thank you guys for watching the video. Stay tuned. There's more to come.